they remember the emotion, how you made them feel in that presentation, they will follow up with you. They'll buy your programs, they'll buy your services, they'll want your consulting, they'll watch your free YouTube videos. They will follow up. And if you suck, they won't, right? So I would focus a lot more on the emotion than the action, because if they feel the emotion, they'll ask you what the action is. They'll go, Sean, you're awesome. What's the action?
My story I'm gonna share a little bit is for the first I think 3 to 5 years I didn't charge anything. A lot of non-profit institutions, a lot of churches, especially schools and universities would get me to speak. I wouldn't charge because I really had no credentials. I didn't study public speaking. I didn't go into competitions like yourself. It is mostly just me wanting to do this and wanting to share what I know to the world, to the younger generation, actually. So I can definitely relate with you when you said, who's this old geezer up on stage? Um, and I wonder, how was your journey like? Were you in a starting point where you had to also give a lot of free talks? The number one speaker here in the Philippines is, at least, his name is Francis Kong. Very popular. First 10 years, didn't charge anything. And then after that, he charged a whooping amount. So, and in his case, I think that made sense because he's super popular already. I kind of copied his playbook on that. So the first 3 to 5 years, no charge. And then when the demands kept piling up, finally I said, oh man, I have to charge so that only those who really want to get me would get me. But how was it in your case? I would like to know.
That's a great question. So my advice to people is very simple. If you're not willing to speak 300 times for free, I don't think you should go pro. Because everyone in the industry that's more successful than I am right now have always said the same thing, including Gary Vee and Seth Godin and all those people, is you speak for free, you speak because you care. You don't speak because you want to make money. And those are the people who actually do end up charging and making money. And it's evident in your case because you have this podcast. You don't charge people to listen to this conversation,
Yeah,
right?
I make no
And
money.
right, it's of course in the same way I'm losing money on my YouTube channel, for being honest, because I spend a lot of my own capital on video production. That's the point. When you come with that frame of mind of caring first, adding value, the money comes later. So even today, if I'm being honest, yes, I do have, some speaking engagements I get paid for and all that stuff, at different rates. But I think the idea is a lot of my speaking is still free, even today. Why? For the exact same reason you just mentioned. Lots of nonprofits, universities can't afford my rate, right? So I just give it for free, especially virtually, since I don't have to fly out to the. Obviously, these days, if I have to fly out for a conference, I obviously charge for it. But now, it's virtual. I'm always trying to find ways to promote the channel, to add value to people. Podcasting is one of those things as well. Just adding value wherever I can. So I completely agree. Definitely speak for free at the beginning. You should never expect money if your talk is not world class, in my opinion.
Fantastic advice right there, guys. And I'm also one of those people who actually went through that. I do still speak for free, and there is one upcoming this weekend that I'm going to be speaking for free. And I want you guys to know why I do it. It is a school, and that's because I have a company and we are hiring. And actually, one of the best hiring strategies that I have would be to speak in schools and tell them, "Hey, we're hiring. If you're done with school, just come in and apply." So that's one big reason why I do it. You may consider that one as well. So you're hitting a lot of birds with one stone, actually. And I want to tackle one of the tactical stuffs when you're on stage. And I'm cheating a little bit when I ask you this question because this is a hypothetical one. I want to ask you, what is more important? Leaving a lasting emotion to your audience or a lasting actionable lesson? Now, I know both are important, but if you were to choose one of them, lasting emotion or lasting actionable lesson, what would it be?
That is a super interesting question I've never been asked before. But my thinking is, so kudos to you, but my thinking is definitely the emotion. Let me explain why. At the end of the day, as a speaker, whether you're speaking for a day, like in a workshop, whether you're speaking for an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours, whatever the length is, you cannot teach them everything. That's just the reality of the situation. Not because you don't add value, not because you stink, but because you don't have enough time. So, how do you get them to do the work? The only way to get them to do the work is to make sure that they felt something from listening to you. It goes back to the whole content versus delivery, right? A lot of people ask me that. The answer is for sure delivery, but it's not even close, and I'll explain why. Think about all of your high school teachers. Think about all of your college teachers. They're all really smart people. How much do we actually remember from their presentations? Right? At the end of the day, best exactly zero. Best case scenario, if you're the best speaker in the world, best speakers, like top 1%, people are going to remember one, maybe two things. So if they remember the emotion, how you made them feel in that presentation, they will follow up with you. They'll buy your programs, they'll buy your services, they'll want your consulting, they'll watch your free YouTube videos. They will follow up. And if you suck, they won't, right? So I would focus a lot more on the emotion than the action, because if they feel the emotion, they'll ask you what the action is. They'll go, Sean, you're awesome. What's the action? And the same way with me. A lot of my competitors are really dry with communication. They go, oh, focus on silences. I'm like, I know. That's not what's going to get people to take action. What gets people to take action is by bringing that emotion, that drive, that passion, what we do, explaining why we do it, how we do it, and more importantly, giving them that small, quick win that convinces them how to speak and why they should speak.
That's awesome. Emotion. I'm just trying to validate it with you because the last speaking webinar that I attended also said the same thing. Guys, if you're listening, that is one big mistake that I did early on. I tried to go for the lesson. I tried to go for the logic, the reasoning, and it did not help that much even if people after the talk would tell me, "Hey, great talk." I don't think I was able to, if I were to upsell them anything or even ask them to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Instagram, I don't think it's going to work because I didn't hit the emotion that well. So if you're listening and you aspire to be a public speaker, you want to make the same amount of money that Brenden is making, then go for the emotion.
One thing I want to focus on though, Sean, because I hate that that advice, because emotion is so vague. What does that even mean, right? So let me add a bit more layer there. Never focus on the emotion at the beginning if you're a beginner speaker. Why am I saying that? Because if you've only practiced your talk 2 or 3 times, the emotion will never come out. And let me explain why. The reason is because you still haven't mastered your content. So let's say you have a teacher who's presenting a subject, they're not really thinking about how to make this better for their audience. It just stalemates. So you can't like put a joke in there and expect it's going to change. What happens is you transition from logic to emotion. So when I started, I was very showboaty. So that means for those in the Philippines, it's like you gloat, you talk about your accomplishments a lot. Why did I do that? Because I was scared. I was insecure. I was a 22-year-old boy presenting to 60-year-old executives. I didn't even know why I was in the room, right? So I kept telling them my client list and all that stuff. And I wasn't adding that much value, not because I didn't have value to add, but because I was insecure. But then over time, when I kept presenting the same presentation over and over, like when I was at the 50th time I was presenting it, I knew the content. So I started asking different questions. What emotions am I conveying in this slide? How is my audience reacting? Is this actually helping them? And then you transition from thinking about your audience to talking to them. And when I started talking to them, 10-year-old Rebecca, 55-year-old IBM executive Tim, I realized that it wasn't about accomplishments. It was about selling the emotion, and then I transferred. But you need to present the same presentation to transfer from logic to emotion, or you'll never get there. And you're the best example. You spent years crafting your talk, right?
Yeah, crafting different talks, unfortunately, not just
Yeah.
one big one. So, yeah, that's one big mistake that I've definitely done. Even to today, there are times where I would craft completely different talks, even for pro bono clients, and I wouldn't change just 10 to 20%. I'm learning though. I am learning. So I would recycle more talks because it does cost a lot of money to have my PowerPoint design. And I use the Pecha Kucha style. So like one slide would be 1 or 2 to 5 seconds. So you can imagine my slides would be.
And one thing for the entrepreneurs in the room to add value to you, there's also a huge opportunity cost of your own time, right?
Yeah,
Your time now is worth $1,500. If you spend, another 2 hours building a pro bono thing,
yeah,
it's not adding
that's
value to the
true.
business.
That's true. Completely agree. Now, stemming from this conversation, I want to ask, what is your playbook in terms of digging your talk deep into the audience's soul, their emotion? I know someone who puts humor first and then humility about sharing his or her story and then goes on to help. So HHH. There is a playbook for every speaker. I wonder what's yours, and can you share that with us?
Of course, I'm happy to. I'm always very open on podcasts. Don't worry. So the key is it's not about tactics, it's about religion. And by religion, I don't mean Christianity. I mean what's the overall way of thinking about a keynote. Some people are great at emotion. Some people are great at jokes. Some people are more sarcastic. There's no right solution here, but rather the solution that works for you. So let's start with the first part of the playbook. The first part is to figure out your key idea. And here's a question that will help you figure it out. If it was your last presentation ever for the rest of time, after you present, you're gone. You never get to present again. And in that speech, you can present for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours, doesn't really matter. Your audience is not going to remember your name. Your audience is not going to remember your title or your accomplishments or even your content. But what they will remember is one sentence. What do you want the sentence to be? So if you take me as an example, and we can run this with you as well, Sean, if you want like a coaching kind of conversation. But the idea with me is at the end of the day, I could present to executives, show them my advanced tips and tricks. I could go to beginners, show them, how to conquer their fear. But at the end of the day, if there's one sentence I'm trying to convince you of, it's the following. I believe anyone can master public speaking. And I believe public speaking fear is a myth. Anyone can do it. If I could do it, you could do it. That's it. The second part of the framework is defending that key idea. Now that you know what it is, whether it's, increasing marketing leads for your company, whether it's starting a podcast, getting more people to subscribe, whether it's convincing people that anyone can master public speaking. Once you know what that key idea is, the second part is figuring out how to defend it. What is the best way to defend your key idea based on your core competency as a speaker? If you don't like to make people laugh, obviously don't use humor, but use the tools that work best for you. So once again, I'll use myself as an example. When I started keynoting off that key idea, I sucked. I talked about my accomplishments. I said, oh yeah, this is what I do, and it sucked. Like it was just bad. But over time, after it was like 50 times I presented garbage, and I was starting to, have breakfast with my clients, talk to them, have coffees with them, dinner sometimes. A lot of them would say, 10-year-olds in particular, would go, what's a CEO? What's IBM? I don't know this thing. And that's when it clicked. I was like, I shouldn't use that language because it doesn't work. But they told me, all of them, whether you were a senior tenured executive or tenured, they all said the same thing, Sean. And that same thing was, I can't be you. And I asked them, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, Brenden, you're a great speaker. You presented hundreds of times. I can't do that. And I asked them why. I said, why do you think that? They said, oh, well, you have all these clients, all these accomplishments. You've done all these things. I can't catch up to you. This is impossible. I can't do it. Great tips though, but I can't do it. So from that advice, by talking to your clients, I changed my keynote from my accomplishment. And this is how I start my keynotes now with. When I was 5 years old, I remember being deathly afraid of public speaking. Imagine being in a room and not knowing how to even present in the language. And that's the story that I start my presentations with. So whether you're 10-year-old Rebecca or you're 55-year-old Tim, you look at me and you go, if this kid can go on and be one of the best speakers in the country, I think I can master public speaking and I win. So what's that key idea for you and how are you going to defend it? Is it a quote? Is it a story? Just make sure and understand that as the messenger of your own message, you know more about digital marketing than I do. That means you know best how to defend your idea more than I ever could.
Love it. And as far as coaching goes, this is, as far as I'm concerned, super, super good. I'm learning. And yeah, it just goes to show that even if I've been doing this for 10 years, that I'm really learning a lot from Brenden right now. It doesn't matter if you want to learn from someone who's younger, but learn definitely from someone who knows more than you do and consider them a better person. Because that is what is happening right now, folks. You are seeing it. I love that advice. One big idea that you want to deliver, because that is the truth. I've been speaking again 10 years now, and I usually have like 3 to 5 points, but if I'm gonna be honest, they only remember one of them, and the best one at that, and then you have to defend it. Fantastic advice. Now, you mentioned in your bio that you listened to around 10 podcasts, 10 hours of podcasts a week. Now, a lot of people struggle with learning. There are people like yourself. I would consider myself as a learner as well. I love reading books and listening to podcasts. But a lot of people I know just struggle with learning and setting aside time to learn something new. And it just boggles me because when you listen to a podcast, you can do that while driving or while exercising, maybe even taking a shower if you have a Bluetooth speaker. So I'm wondering, how do you do it? Because I want people to learn that it is not hard to invest in yourself. There's tons of podcasts out there that deliver tons of value. And all you have to do is turn it on. But how, like some people are wondering, how do I do it? How do I do it? What's your advice to them?
Of course, and I agree with a lot of the points that you just mentioned. One thing actually I wanted to add before I get to that question is the third part of the playbook that I'd love to throw out there because I forgot to mention it. A lot of people ask me a great analogy with public speaking, and a great analogy I like to give is jigsaw puzzles. So, you know, those 1,000-piece puzzles, right? So if I asked you the same question, Sean, if you were working on that puzzle with me, which pieces would you start with first?
The corners.
The corners, exactly. We don't do that in public speaking. Public speaking, we start with the middle pieces. We shove a bunch of content in our slides, and then we get to the last one. We go, oh yeah, it's my last slide, so I'm done. In public speaking, make sure you start with the edges first in the same way you do with puzzles. Think about your introduction. Do the introduction only like 50 times. Spend an hour, just do your introduction 50 times. Do the same thing with your conclusion, and then figure out the middle. Because if you have a poor ending, it's like having a great movie and seeing it end really terribly. And you're just like, wait, what just happened? Right? That's how you transition from a $1,000 speaker to a $10,000 one. So small ad there for the learning. Right? I agree. When I was 19, 18 years old, I was really poor, so I couldn't afford all this like programs and services and consulting. But like you said, there was a lot of podcasts I listened to. So I think the first step to learning is to figure out what you want out of life. What answers are you craving for? What questions do you want to figure out? So for me, I don't like wasting my time. I realize that life is very short, even if I was 18 at the time. I need to figure out what my game plan is for the rest of my life, whether I live another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And I went to podcasts personally for a couple of reasons. One is because I'm a really slow reader, really shit at reading, to be honest. It takes me too long to read a page. So I started listening to pods. And the reason they're so effective is because you can jump into the life of somebody for an hour or 30 minutes. And if that person adds value to you, then you read their book, then you watch their other videos. But if they don't, you just move on to the next person, right? Oh, this person's useless. I hope I'm adding value here, but you get the idea, right? You want
A
to,
lot.
you,
A lot.
I appreciate you want to invest your time in the best possible way to figure out the answers that you want from the questions you seek. That's the best way of going about it. So then what happened with me is I started listening to a lot of these podcasts. So more specifically for me, and that's the key, pick the ones that you like. So I pretty much only listen to Lewis Howes's School of Greatness. So for those who don't know, it's like a top 100 podcast in the world. So I started listening to his episodes when he was getting started. So he's like 7 years in now. I'm probably one of the few people in the world who has listened to all the episodes. I think I've listened to like 95% of his catalog. For people who don't know, each episode's an hour. He has 1,000. So I've listened to like 1,000 hours. So for 3 years, I just listened to that podcast because I like Lewis's voice. Very simple. In the same way everyone likes Sean's voice, people are listening to it. It's the same
I
thing.
hope so.
Right. That's the key. Right. But what I was realizing is I was getting smart really, really fast. Right? I was learning about relationships, art, music, sports, because Lewis, that's the third part. What's great about podcasts is they introduce you to the best people in their network. So if Sean knows 1,000 great entrepreneurs in the Philippines and around the world, he's only going to invite the top 2%, 1% onto the show because he only has a limited amount of spots. That means the more successful the host is, the better quality of content you get on the show, right? And that's the secret. So the key to learning is to understand what you want out of life and figure out who you need to learn from to get to that result. And if you do that, you'll get addicted to learning in the same way I have.
Fantastic advice, dude. This here is something that everyone needs to learn. Public speaking is the thing to know and master during this time, especially for leaders, entrepreneurs, and managers who are the target market of this podcast. And you are doing them a big favor right now, giving us so much stuff, so much advice, so much of your experience. And I want to thank you here. And we're like halfway. We're only halfway.